Well, good morning. Welcome to the overview for condominium manager licensing. For those of you who do not know me, I am Doug Dixon, one of RECA's regulatory compliance advisors. My role is to assist brokers and managers with any regulatory or regulatory related practice issues. I've been in the real estate industry going on 40 years now. My condo experience includes selling condos and working with builders and developers in the 80s and 90s. I've been in the regulatory positions for about 25 years and have dealt with many condo issues during that time. For the last 3 years, I've been providing support to the Condominium Manager Implementation Advisory Committee. I also own and have lived in a Bearland condo for the last 10 years and have been on its board of directors for the last 8 years. Sorry, just a technical difficulty here. Here are the topics I'll be presenting today. In order to keep the presentation moving along and be respectful of your time, I will answer questions at the end of the presentation. As I'm going to go through the presentation, please add any questions you may have in the question and answer function at the bottom of the screen, not the chat function, the question and answer function. Once I have finished the formal presentation, you'll have an opportunity to get your questions answered and ask other questions on anything I have covered or anything else related to the regulation and licensing of condominium management. As many of the people applying for a condominium management license are not familiar with the Myrica online licensing system, I ask for the patience for those who are already experienced with the system. There is a lot of information to cover, so let's get started. The first thing I will comment before I get into detail is that last week, the Residential Property Management Industry Council made a change to the requirements for the conditional licensing. Up till now, we have been saying that in order to qualify for a conditional license effective December 1st, a person must have a minimum of 2 years experience in condominium management. As the courses will not be available well in advance of that December 1st date, the Industry Council has changed that requirement and has moved it to anyone with 75 days or more experience as of December 1st. So that will allow people that are currently involved with condominium management but have less than 2 years experience to get a conditional license. So the conditions will apply to those under 2 years as it will to the people over 2 years. So here are the topics I'll be presenting today, as I said, and I'll be going through them some quickly and some a little more slowly, depending on the detail involved. So first of all, the new governance structure that came into effect December 1st of 2020 has 11 public and 12 industry members. One of the requirements is that the board chair must be one of the public members. Each sector regulated by RECA has an industry council. As you can see, condominium management comes under the Residential Property Manager Industry Council, shown at the far right on this slide. This council will be responsible for all types of condominium management, including residential, commercial, industrial, and many of the miscellaneous types of condominiums out there. We have marinas, campgrounds, cottage parks. There's actually even an airport that's condominiumized. This definition of condominium management is being added to the Real Estate Act. You can see from this that the main points is exercising the power or performing the duties of a condominium corporation on behalf of a condominium corporation, but not limited to. So collecting, holding, dispersing, or attempting to collect or hold contributions, enforcing the bylaws or rules of a corporation, negotiating or entering into contracts for the corporation, and supervising employees or contractors hired or engaged by the corporation. So this is a very broad definition. As you can see, it says in the first portion, it says including but not limited to. So RECA will be interpreting different activities to see if they are activities that fall out of these various areas or lead into them, as the case may be. Administrators, assistants, bookkeeping staff would not normally require a license if only providing support services to condominium managers. Here's a high-level timeline of how the licensing of condominium management will proceed. So eligibility opened on August the 3rd, and I'll go through the details for eligibility. Eligibility is a process that allows you to find out if you qualify for the conditional license on December 1st. So it's the first step that leads into licensing. Then on October 12th, the license application process will open, and this will be when people can actually apply for their license if they've been approved through the eligibility process. The license application process first requires all condominium management brokerages to register their brokerage and get it licensed and license their broker at the same time. The two things go hand in hand. You can't have a broker without a brokerage, and you can't have a brokerage without a broker. So before anybody else at the brokerage can get licensed, the broker and the brokerage must be licensed through the Myrica system. Once that's done, then the broker can start adding the various people that they will be having working for their brokerage as licensed condominium managers. So this slide shows the 3 different levels of licenses that will be issued for condominium management. It's similar to other categories or industries that RECA currently licenses. So the first is the company, and under the licensing structure, it's called a brokerage. So all condominium management companies that provide condominium management services to condo corporations will be required to be licensed as a brokerage. Each brokerage will have a broker, and the broker is the person that's responsible to the real estate council under the legislation for the operation of the brokerage and meeting all the regulatory requirements. You can also have associate brokers licensed with the brokerage. An associate broker is somebody that holds the same qualifications as a broker, but is not acting in the role of broker. Sometimes companies will have an associate brokers assigned to various management functions to assist the broker, depending on the size of the brokerage. And lastly, we have associates, so condominium manager associates, and they are the frontline people that meet with condominium corporation boards and provide the services directly to the condo corporations. And they work under the supervision of the broker. So although the licensing structure uses the term condominium manager associate, associates can continue to refer to themselves as condo managers if they prefer. This would include on business cards, letterhead, emails, etc. We had a lot of feedback when we did the consultations, and some people were upset that we were calling them associates. But as in real estate, for instance, in real estate, people call themselves, although they're a real estate associate, they call themselves salesperson, representative, realtor, many different terms, and those are all fine as long as it's not misrepresenting the role of the person. So in condominium management, if a person, instead of calling themselves a condominium manager associate, prefer to call themselves condominium manager or condo manager, that's quite fine with RECA. So I mentioned conditional licenses. In order to move an unregulated industry into a regulated structure, RECA will issue conditional licenses to approved applicants subject to them taking the appropriate steps to remove the conditions by December 1st of 2022. So they'll have 12 months from the time the licensing begins to remove these conditions. Licensees issued a conditional license will be encouraged to challenge the appropriate exam or exams as soon as possible after being issued a license. This will allow time to complete any courses if necessary and retake the exam or exams well in advance of December 1st, 2022. Any licensees that fail to do this will have their license suspended until they meet the requirements. While suspended, they would not be able to provide condominium management services until the conditions are removed and they reinstate their license. From the discussions I've had with many brokers and owners of companies doing condominium management, it is clear many plan for their condominium managers to complete the appropriate courses prior to challenging the exam or exams. This is because they believe their condo managers will be more professional, knowledgeable, and it will lessen liability for their brokerage. So you will likely see many reminders in the January-February time period from RECA to condominium managers with conditional licenses saying, please start the process early, don't leave it late. We know from regulating the industries that we have for the last 25 years, many people are prone to leaving things to the last minute. And in this case, you don't want to leave the exam challenges and any course requirements until next fall, and then find out that if you just do the exam challenge, that you don't pass the exam challenge and then have to do the course on top of your regular workload. So please start the process as early as possible. Shown here are 3 different situations that currently exist for brokerages or unlicensed companies in the condominium management industry. So in the blue square, we have brokerages currently licensed with RECA that only do condominium management. So we have quite a few brokerages who are licensed typically in property management under the real estate legislation. And they've chosen to be licensed for numerous reasons, but the only activity they carry out is condominium management. Those people, or those brokerages, sorry, many of those will drop their real estate licensing and switch it over to being a condominium management brokerage. So if those brokerages have renewed at the end of this month on the regular licensing cycle, they will renew their current real estate license for typically, as I say, for property management. And as of October 1st would be licensed for the next 12 months, they will be able to transfer their license over to if they're just going to do condominium management, to a condominium management brokerage, and there will be no charge for that change of the licensing. Brokerage is currently licensed with RECA, but they provide numerous services. So that would be the center green square. So they're licensed with RECA, and they may do property management and condominium management, or they may also do real estate sales of some kind or leasing. So they do provide multiple services. In those cases, they will have to open a second brokerage specifically for condominium management, and would have to move the condominium management operation out of their real estate brokerage into the condominium management brokerage. And the company that owns their current brokerage can also own the new condominium management brokerage. So they don't have to create a new company. They can have 2 brokerages under the same company because the 2 brokerages are in 2 different industries as far as the licensing structure is concerned. The third square in orange is for companies that do condominium management who are not currently licensed with RECA. So the only thing they do is condominium management. So these companies will have to have their company registered with RECA as a condominium management brokerage in order to move forward as of December 1st. So there are several situations regarding the status of brokers depending on the business model of the brokerage. So again, in the blue square, we have brokerages, a person licensed as a broker who only does condominium management through their brokerage. So again, our expectation is most of those brokers will transfer their license from being a real estate broker to a condominium management broker as of December 1st. So they can renew at the end of this month their real estate broker's license, but prior to December 1st, they can transfer it over to be a condominium manager broker. In the green square are people who are where the broker is involved with the condominium management and they provide various real estate services. So the broker is involved and they provide condominium management as well as maybe property management or sales. So in that case, the broker would be qualified typically to be the broker for both the real estate brokerage and the condominium manager brokerage, if they so choose. In some cases, I know there are some brokers that are going to only manage one of the brokerages and move up one of their staff who's qualified to be the broker for the other operation. But it is possible for the broker of a real estate brokerage who meets the requirements to also be the broker for a condominium management brokerage. The last situation in orange is if the broker of a current real estate brokerage that does multiple services is not involved with the condominium management operation. So we know there's situations where a brokerage does multiple services, including condominium management, but they have somebody, a more senior person in condominium management who basically runs the condominium management services for them. But under the licensing structure, there has to be a broker who's qualified to do condominium management. So if the broker is not involved, the current broker is not involved with condominium management, they would not qualify as the broker for the condominium management brokerage and would have to have somebody else be the broker for their condominium management brokerage. In this situation, this slide explains different situations for associates currently licensed with RECA. So these are frontline condominium managers. So if that person only does condominium management, they would be able to transition their license from a real estate license to a condominium management license if that's what they choose to do, and not continue to maintain the real estate license. In the green square, it would be somebody who is doing condominium management, but may also be doing other services. So it's not uncommon for a condominium manager to also be doing property management. And if that is the case, the associate, and they want to continue doing that, then the associate can be licensed both as a real estate associate and a condominium manager associate. So they can hold two different licenses at two different brokerages because they're in two different industries. So that's not a problem. They would be paying, in all these cases where there's a brokerage that's now splitting up and having two different brokerages, or when there's a broker with doing two different brokerages, or associates who are licensed at two different brokerages, they would be paying licensing fees under each brokerage. Now, the next 4 slides, I'm going to go quickly through the process of from where we are today to getting a conditional license and then having those conditions removed. So this first slide is about people who are currently licensed with RECA. So this would be frontline condo managers who are currently licensed with RECA. Excuse me. And so under the eligibility, the only requirement that they have to do under eligibility may be to provide some identification documents. Prior to January of 2014, there were different requirements for identification documents. And so if the person applying now hasn't provided the documents that are required, they'll be requested as part of the eligibility process. We've simplified the eligibility process for people who are currently licensed because we already know who they are, and we have the various steps for eligibility through their real estate license already in place. So we're not asking for that again. They would have to complete an affirmation of their experience and details of condominium corporations they've managed. And I'll go through the affirmation form in a couple of minutes. They would do that, provide that information uploaded to Myrica, and I'll go through the process for using Myrica a little bit later on as well. Then they would make license applications. So as I said before, license applications will open effective October the 12th. So associates will not be able to process their license application through Myrica until their broker and brokerage have been licensed. Once that's done, then they will be able to go through with their licensing application. So once we get to that stage, that they have been approved through the eligibility and through the licensing process for a conditional license, people who are currently licensed as an associate and have the necessary experience for condominium management, so that would be 75 days or more as of December 1st of 2021, they would have to do an exam challenge for only one exam, and that would be the condominium manager practices exam. Should they not be successful in passing the exam, they would be required to do the condominium manager practices course and then retake the exam. If they're successful, then they would have the condition removed from their license, and they would then be operating with an unconditional license. And as I said, if they're not successful, they would have to do the appropriate course and then retake the exam until they are successful. This next slide is about frontline condominium managers who are not currently licensed with the Real Estate Council. So they are new to the regulatory structure. And as a result of that, you can see that there are more eligibility requirements. Although RECA has stripped out a couple of the eligibility requirements to make it simpler, because those of you that are in the industry now and unlicensed don't have a choice to move forward and be licensed. The government has mandated that as of December 1st, everybody providing condominium management services must be licensed. So we have a requirement for you to provide your proof of ability to work in Canada. You have to provide a government issued photo identification. You also have to provide a certified criminal record check, and I'm going to go through the details on that a little later. Also be of good character, and I'll explain that later. And persons who have been permanently withdrawn from the industry membership are not eligible for licensing under Section 54. So what that means is if somebody has had a complaint lodged against them in the past, and it was a serious issue, and prior to it going through the full investigation and hearing process, the person has decided that rather than go through all of that, they are not going to continue to hold a license. So under Section 54, they can agree to withdraw from the being licensed, and they would agree in that they will never apply for another license through the Real Estate Council in the future. And then if they've signed off on that and that has been approved by council, then they would move forward. They would not be able to move forward with a license in any class or industry. So we know that there are a few people that have in fact in the past had problems and done a Section 54 and are no longer licensed, but they are practicing in the condominium management world because they didn't need to be licensed. As of December 1st, they will no longer be able to practice as condominium managers because they will not be eligible for licensing and not be able to hold a license. So two of the things that are normally part of the eligibility requirements is that persons must provide proof of a high school certificate or better, and that is not being required. And also English proficiency proof is not being required. So those two have been stripped out to make it simpler for people moving forward. They would have the same experience requirements, providing an affirmation and details of their experience. And then they would go through the same process where they'd make application for a license if they've been approved from the eligibilizing process. And they would be granted after they complete their license application, they would be granted a conditional license effective December 1st. They would have the same situation that they would have to prove their abilities in condominium management, except now because they've never been licensed with RECA, they don't get credit for one of the courses, which is the fundamentals for condominium managers. People who currently are licensed with RECA will have completed the fundamentals of real estate, which is a similar course to the one being developed for condominium management. But the differences would be that the examples in the legislation referred to in the courses in the existing course would be real estate related, and the new course will be condominium management related. But both courses cover off issues such as contract law, agency, dealing with legislation in a regulated industry. So it was felt they were similar enough that people who have already done that course would in fact get credit for it. So if anybody is in the process of doing that course now and has it completed by December 1st, they will also get credit for that course and not have to do the exam challenge for it. But for most people who are currently unlicensed, if they've never done the courses, the fundamentals course, then they would be required to challenge the exam for fundamentals and also for condominium manager practices. If successful at both exams, the conditions would be removed from their license. If unsuccessful on either exam, the one that they're unsuccessful on, they would have to complete the appropriate course and rewrite the exam, and then the conditions would be removed from their license. So this next situation deals with brokers and associate brokers. And as I said, brokers and associate brokers have the same qualifications, except the broker is the person that's designated in charge of a brokerage, and an associate broker does not have broker responsibilities unless they've been designated some responsibilities by a broker, and they would still just hold the associate broker license. So these people who are currently licensed with RECA as brokers, the only eligibility requirement may be some submission of identification documents, and then they would go through the same affirmation process and providing details of properties they've been involved with managing or corporations. And then once their eligibility is approved, they would be again issued a conditional license after they've gone through the application process that would be effective December 1st. They also have an exam challenge for the condominium manager practices exam, and they would not have to challenge either the fundamentals or the broker's course exams because they've already done that to hold a broker's license under real estate. So they're given, they're seen as being eligible as long as they pass the exam for condominium manager practices. If they pass the exam, then there's no course requirement and the condition is removed. But should they not pass the exam, then they would have to do the course and then retake the exam until they're successful. The last category is people who meet the requirements for being a broker or an associate broker, but are not currently licensed with the Real Estate Council. So similar to associates who are not currently licensed, the eligibility process is a little bit more involved for them because they haven't been licensed with the Real Estate Council. And as a result, they would have to, again, provide their proof of eligibility to work in Canada, personal identification, do a criminal record check, be of good character, and they can't be somebody who's been subject to a Section 54. Now, you would be uploading this to establish your proof of ability to work in Canada and your personal identification. You would be uploading government documents to do that, and some people are concerned about the privacy issue and the protection of that information. What happens is when you upload that information through the Myrica process, that information is reviewed by one of our licensing officers, and once they're satisfied that it meets the requirements, they mark in the system that that information has been received and verified, and then they delete the actual document that you have provided. So RECA does not store those documents and keep tens of thousands of driver's licenses or passports or birth certificates, all of those types of things. We do not maintain those documents. Once we've established that they meet the requirement, we mark it in the system that we've received it, and then we delete it from our system. So, somebody who meets that unlicensed and meets the broker or associate broker requirements would go through all of the same process of eligibility under the experience. They would apply for a license, get approved for their license effective December 1st. And because they have not done any of the courses or exams, a person at the broker or associate broker actually has 3 exams that they would have to challenge: the fundamentals, the condominium manager practices, and the condominium manager broker. If they're successful at all of those, then they would not have to do the courses and their conditions would be removed from their license. If they're unsuccessful, they would have to do the appropriate course that they were unsuccessful in the exam, and then rewrite the exam until they're successful. Many people ask, how are the courses made up? What are they covering? And what are the courses covering? Well, I can't tell you at this point because that information hasn't been finalized, and we're not expecting it to be until the earliest, probably November. So in the meantime, if you are curious as to what kind of information is going to be in the courses and exams, you can go to the RECA website and click on the button on the homepage for condominium management, and that will take you to a page where you can find a link that will take you to the core competencies and learning outcomes for condominium manager manager practices, and you will see all the details of what has to be included in the courses, and as a result, what will be tested on the exams. So that will give you an idea of where things are going. So I mentioned I would touch on good character, and good character is used at two different time frames as a regulator. One is when we're evaluating somebody for a license, and secondly, if there's a complaint against the person, that in particular, if it's a more serious complaint, we would be looking at good character in that kind of a situation. So you can see here the essentials of a good character are what you would expect, I think, for a regulated industry. Serve the public interest and protect consumers, promote high ethical standards, protect the reputation of the industry, promote integrity of the industry, and enhance public confidence in the ability of individuals. So when we're doing that, the way we assess that is, does the applicant or the person that's had a complaint against them have respect for the rule of law? Have they established honesty, governability, financial responsibility, professionalism? I'll touch on two of these. Governability, many people may not be familiar with, but from time to time, we'll get somebody that is proving that they're not a person who wants to follow the rules. They don't want to work in a regulated industry and do what's required in a regulated industry. And that's taken very seriously. One of the more serious examples that has happened in recent years is a situation where a person was not meeting the requirements for advertising. So that typically would fall, when we deal with that, the first time we deal with it, normally it would be either just a letter saying you need to change some advertising or change your approach to conform with the rules. Then that might be elevated to a letter of reprimand. It could result in a fine. Typically, a starting fine would be $1,500, and then it would go up from there if a person continued to violate the advertising rules. In this particular instance, this person had decided that the fines and sanctions that they were getting were in fact just a cost of doing business. And so they were quite happy to pay the fines and keep doing the advertising they were doing, which did not meet our requirements. So that elevated to more and more serious fines, and the person continued to do it. So it ended up in that person being taken to a hearing and going through that process. At the end of the day, they were suspended from practice for a lengthy period of time, and the fines and hearing costs, I believe, were in excess of $90,000 at the end of the day. So that's an example of what can happen for a lack of governability. And if it was to continue, then it would mean the person would lose their license entirely if they still continued to do something that was against the rules. Financial responsibility, the main thing we would normally look for is bankruptcy proceedings. And a bankruptcy proceeding would either be a full bankruptcy, or it could be a consumer process of settling of debts. So either one of those, we would fall under the bankruptcy legislation and must be disclosed. A simple bankruptcy is not a bar to getting a license. So if in fact any applicants have had a bankruptcy in their past, they would have to provide the documentation for release from bankruptcy that they were cleared from it, but it would not bar them from being licensed. What would bar or potentially bar somebody from being licensed is if they've been bankrupt numerous times, because again, that's showing a lack of financial responsibility if they get themselves out of bankruptcy and then they continue to do the same practices that put them in bankruptcy in the first time and repeat that process over and over again. That may cause problems for getting a license. And I'll speak to this issue a little later because there's a question on the licensing applications that you need to be aware of. This next piece is just to let you know that as part of a regulated industry, RECA has several different processes that we do beyond licensing and dealing with day-to-day practices. One of them is the Trust Assurance and Practice Review Program. And RECA has staff that go out and visit brokerages. So once condominium management brokerages are licensed, they will start to see a person from our Trust Assurance and Practice Review Program call them typically a couple of weeks or a month in advance and say they will be coming on a certain date to review the brokerage's operations. They would look at your record keeping, and also if you're holding trust funds on behalf of condominium corporations, they would look at your trust accounts and the handling of those trust accounts and your overall operation from a regulatory perspective. This is treated as an education process. So they're there to try to help you as a brokerage and individuals in meeting the requirements under the Real Estate Act for condominium management. So it's not a, some people think of it as that it's a scary process, you know, that somebody's coming and they're doing what often in the past got termed as an audit, and that's not the case. We really make a strong effort to treat this as an educational process. Once the staff person has completed the review, they typically sit down with the broker and often with the senior administrator of the brokerage and go over their findings. If there's any concerns, they would make recommendations as to how those things could be fixed. Also, if there's any suggestions on how to make things work better, they would make those suggestions and they will follow that up with a written report to the broker. The only time it sort of changes to a much more serious issue is if the trust assurance officer was to discover that there was very serious issues such as fraud taking place. And in that case, they would make a referral to our conduct review department and they would investigate in more detail. So we also have, as I said, our conduct review, and that's the department that deals with all complaints in general, whether it's something that's referred from Trust Assurance and Practice Review, referred from other staff sources, or is from the public or somebody in the industry. They would, if they receive a complaint, they review the complaint and to try to determine if in fact it is a violation or a breach of the act, the bylaws, etc. Again, this is not something for people who are doing their job properly to worry about. Because we do receive a lot of complaints. I can speak to it from a real estate perspective, but I know just in my experience over the last 2 years, the number of calls I get from unit owners and board members, that we are going to see, particularly in probably the first year or two, a significantly high number of complaints in the condominium management industry. Our experience has been that approximately half the complaints we receive end up getting dismissed, either because they don't fall under the legislation, they're not appropriate for RECA to deal with for numerous reasons. In many of those cases, we would refer the complainant to a source that's more appropriate for their complaint. So it may actually be a problem they're having from a legal perspective. They may need to deal with the Law Society, or it may be a problem with their accountant. It's something that they have to deal with the accounting regulator. So we would recommend they go to a different source with their issue. If it is an issue that we can deal with through the real estate council, then it would go through a full investigation, and many of the issues that do go to a full investigation, even they get dismissed because of lack of evidence. In some cases, people make complaints and then they're not prepared to follow through on it. And if they're not prepared to follow through, then we have to close the file. So there's many different things that can happen. We also investigate and prosecute persons who provide unlicensed condominium management services. So we've done that in the past for both the mortgage brokerage industry and the real estate industry, and it will also apply to the condominium management industry. So if somebody is found to be practicing condominium management without a license, then we would notify them as soon as we start looking into it that they must cease providing those services. And if they want to continue to provide those services, they would have to get it qualified and licensed. If they fail to cease doing that, providing services, then we would take the next step, and typically we would sanction them. The sanction could start at a lower level, or depending on their attitude and how they cooperate, it could start at a much higher level. RECA has the ability to fine in each instance of a breach of the act or rules up to $25,000. So typically, if somebody was doing unlicensed practice, they would be in breach of several different issues or parts of the legislation or the rules, and they could end up with fines $75,000, $100,000 or more. We have had instances of over $100,000 in fines for unlicensed practice. All brokerages doing condominium management will be required to hold errors and omissions insurance. So every brokerage will be required to hold this. This shouldn't be a surprise to most brokerages. And again, most companies doing condominium management, I believe, currently carry errors and omissions insurance. The requirement is going to be a minimum of $1 million coverage. But from people I've talked to, most of the brokerages that we've had that discussion are carrying well in excess of $1 million in coverage. One of the requirements is that you have to have this coverage in place in order to operate as a condominium management brokerage. If for any reason it's terminated, canceled, or expires, then you have to notify the real estate counsel that has happened and make efforts to get it replaced immediately. And while you don't have errors and omissions insurance, you cannot provide condominium management services to condominium corporations. There's also a requirement that there be fraudulent or dishonest acts insurance in place. So this insurance is required under the Condominium Property Act as a result of the recent changes in 2020 to the regulations under the Condominium Property Act. So that change that took place with the regulations that came into effect of July 1st, or sorry, they changed it to January 1st of 2020. That requirement for this type of insurance is mandated for every condominium corporation. So all corporations have to have this coverage. And as a result, that means the coverage has to cover their board of directors, any employees of the condo corporation, and any third-party employees providing condominium management services. So all condominium management brokerages would be covered through the insurance carried by the corporations that they are in fact providing services to. RECA requires that the brokerage insure when at the time that they're putting a service agreement in place, that they check to make sure that the condo corporation in fact has this coverage in place. You cannot, as a condo management brokerage, start providing services unless you know that fraudulent or dishonest acts insurance is in place and covers your brokerage. Initially, when RECA was working on the requirements for the condominium management industry, there was going to be a requirement through the rules that every condominium management brokerage must carry this coverage directly themselves. But when the provincial government changed the requirement, requiring the condo corporations to carry this coverage, we took that requirement out of the rules because it was just going to be a duplicate coverage. And at the end of the day, the condominium corporations would be paying for two coverages, one unnecessarily. However, there's still a place for most brokerages to consider carrying a similar policy to cover them and their staff for issues that might be outside of what's covered through the coverage that the corporations carry. So now I'm going to switch to the Myrica system and go through both setting up a new Myrica account, going through the eligibility process for brand new people to the regulated industry, also the eligibility process for people who are currently licensed with the Real Estate Council and going to be applying for a condominium management license at some level. And then I'll go through the licensing process on Myrica, and lastly, setting up a new brokerage. And that will bring us to the end of the presentation, and then I'll be opening up the floor to the questions. So You will find the Myrica system is actually quite easy to use. It's quite if you have a question about anything that you need to fill out on it, there's usually an information box that you can click on next to where the question or the request for information is that will explain it. Also, you will find on the Myrica website tutorials. And what I'm showing you here today is based on pieces of several of those tutorials. So if you want more detail before you're doing something, you can just simply go to the website in the question or in the search parameter on the home page, just type in tutorials, and it'll bring up the link on our website for you where all the tutorials are. There's, I believe, about 30 tutorials on many different issues, and they're all PDFs that you can just simply download and go through, and they give explanation of all of those different processes. So in order to deal with eligibility and licensing, every individual person must have a Myrica account. So you can go to our homepage and click on setting up a Myrica account. And once you've set up the account, you have to establish an account with a username and password. Usernames are unique in this system. You cannot, your name is not unique, believe it or not, in doing this. So you can't, we don't use names as usernames. And the reason for that is, believe it or not, we can have 2 or 3 John Smiths, for instance, or Mary Stevens or whatever. And to prevent that, our system requires a username, and it will only allow a unique username that is not in the system. And you'll see why that's important a little later on. So you'll set up your Myrica account, again, with your username and password. Once you have done that, you'll start into the system. As these 2 sample tutorial screens I have are related to real estate, you won't see condominium management on them. They will come eventually once we've been able to update those things, the tutorials. But so on our system, you will be able to click on this drop down and select. You'll see condominium management as one of the options on the drop down. So just that's the starting point, because once the system knows it's condominium management that you're going to be requesting a license for, then the system will only ask for information and questions around condominium management as you go through the process. So when you come to this screen, it'll be asking for personal information. It gives a short explanation and then personal information. If you have questions, again, you can click on the little symbol next to what it's asking for, and it will give you an explanation. So fill out all the information that's requested on the screen, and just keep hitting next as you go through the process. And this screen here won't be applicable to most of you. You'll check off no on this in the majority of cases. It's about license mobility. And we have license mobility in real estate with all the provinces in Canada. So a person who holds a salesperson's license, for instance, anywhere in Canada, can apply for a salesperson's license in Alberta, and their qualifications from the other province would be recognized. In condominium management, there are only 3 provinces, 2 at the moment, regulating condominium management. Alberta will be the 3rd on December 1st. And those other 2 provinces are strata management in British Columbia. They don't say condo management, they say strata. And in the province of Ontario, they also have a licensing structure in place. So people who practice in those 2 provinces and hold a condominium management license would be able to receive a license for license if they made application in Alberta as well. So on this slide is tied to suitability, and it's asking you, do you have any issues related to suitability? And it mentions a few things. And if you do, so if you've had a personal bankruptcy, for instance, or you've had a conviction, a criminal conviction in your past, then you would click yes, and then the following screens would provide you with more information. If you click no, then it would skip that step, and it would complete the process to set up your Myrica account. Oh, and I should go back. Just I had mentioned about bankruptcy previously. So if you had a personal bankruptcy in the past, you would click yes here, and then in a following screen, it would request information about that personal bankruptcy, and you'd have to upload the document when your bankruptcy was closed out, finalized. And that would typically be the end of the process as far as we're concerned. We wouldn't investigate further typically. Now I'm going to move on to the eligibility process. So before you can actually apply for a license, you have to establish that you're eligible for that license. So the eligibility requirements are explained here on this slide. So you have to complete the online questions, upload any supporting documents, and if you need to get documents that you don't have in your possession, such as birth certificate or high school certificate, etc., you would need to request those documents and then upload them to RECA. And so this has to be done. Typically for an applicant, you have 6 months to do this process without having to start it from scratch. But in your case, as a condominium manager applicant, you need to get this process taken care of prior to December 1st, because you can't do the licensing before December 1st if you haven't gone through the eligibility process. So this particular part that I'm covering right now applies to brand new licensees, not people who are currently licensed in other industries. So these next few slides are about people who are brand new to being licensed with RECA. So, so here again, it'll list the different industries, and when the updates are done, you'll see condominium management. So you would collect, and then drop down where you say, I want to get a license in, and you select, drop it down and select condominium management, and then click next, and that will take you to the next screen, which gives you the details around eligibility requirements. So are you lawfully able to work in Canada? Do you meet the education standards? Do you meet the English proficiency standards? And did you complete this last one that says, did you complete this online session, is not going to be there for you. And also the education standards and English proficiency standards for a real estate license will not be required for people applying for a condominium management license because they've been set back and not required in order to streamline bringing the unregulated industry into a regulated industry. So on this slide, again, it's simply the explanation. If you need an explanation for any of the items that are there, all of these won't be there for you because they all don't apply to you as a new applicant for a condo manager license. But if any of them that do apply, you want information, just click on the information button beside the question. So on this slide, it says the eligibility questions are complete. You can pay at this point, or you cannot pay it. It's your choice, but your eligibility can't be finalized until the fee has been paid. So there is a fee for brand new people being licensed for the first time through the Real Estate Council. But for people who are currently licensed with RECA, they've already been through the eligibility process. And there's not as much from a workflow from RECA's perspective, so there is no eligibility fee for people who already hold a license and are switching or getting a license for condominium management. So to pay the fee, you'd fill out the appropriate information and pay it. Once that's done, you would hit complete. You must hit complete at this point in order to finalize your eligibility process. If you don't, the work you've done on your application up to that point is lost. So please hit complete. And then once you do that, you'll get an email, a notice that your eligibility process has been completed. not approved, but completed. Now, moving on to your Myrica account, these next several slides apply to persons currently licensed with RECA, but who will be applying for a condominium manager license. So they may be going to switch their license over from real estate to condominium management, or they may be applying for a condominium management license in addition to the current license that they hold. So again, you would fill out your username and password. These people already have an account in the system, so they would sign in. Once they've signed in, as an existing licensee, we already have all their general information. But on this page, you can see that they are in My Account, and they've highlighted or clicked on My Applications. And under My Applications, it shows a couple of things. They're applying for labor mobility, and that wouldn't be the case, but you are applying for condominium manager eligibility. So you would click on that. And as soon as you click on that, it would take you to the next step in the process. So it gives you an explanation of the things that I've already talked about in the presentation. And then you would click Next. And here again, it asks you for experience. There's two questions. These have now been changed on the online system since last Wednesday. So when you go here, it will no longer say, do you have at least 2 years experience in the last 5 engaging in condominium management services? That will say 75 days instead of 2 years. And this would be effective as of December 1st. And the second question would apply in the case of somebody who's going to be applying for either a broker or associate broker's license. So in this instance, do you have at least 2 years of experience in the last 5 years in managing a condominium management company? So that would remain the same as the 2 years in this instance. So a frontline condo manager who's not involved with running the brokerage, they would only be dealing with the first question. So they would answer yes, that they have 75 days or more experience, and they would answer no to the second question. A person who is applying for either a broker or associate broker license must apply or complete yes to both questions, and that their affirmation would back that up as the process continues. So again, you would that completes this portion, and for a person who's licensed applying for a condominium management license, so you'd hit complete. And again, your work is not saved unless you hit complete at this stage. Oh, and as I mentioned, there's no fee for a person who's currently licensed applying for a condominium management license. So after you've gone through this process to get to this stage, for an existing licensee, again, if they're if they re-sign back into their account, they will see click on My Account, My Applications, and it'll show this application here for the condominium management industry. So they're applying for in this industry. The application is for eligibility. The status is RECA is waiting for details. We're waiting for the applicant to complete those details. And so the applicant must complete. So you would click on complete in this instance, and that would take you to the next portion of this. And you have to upload information, as I mentioned earlier. So there are 2 different things that you would have to upload. One is the affirmation, which I'll come to shortly and show you what's required there. And then the other is the supporting documentation that I mentioned before. So in the instance of a person who is already licensed with RECA, as I said, we made some changes to the requirements under IDs that are approved for application for licensing. And as a result of that, you'll be asked to upload a government issued photo ID. And so you have 2 different things to upload, the affirmation and government ID. So when you're ready to upload those, then you click on upload, and the document a copy of the document on your computer. So you'd have a copy of your ID in an electronic format on your computer. You would also have the completed affirmation scanned back in as a file on your computer. So you would click on upload for both of these. You're given the option of either searching for the document through your browser function, or if you had the document, for instance, on your desktop, you could just drag and drop the document from your desktop onto the screen where the upload takes place. So now I'm going to move on to the eligibility for licensing again, just to review it. So again, as I said, two categories, broker and associate broker, would have the same qualifications, and somebody licensed at this level typically has the education background and experience at the management level of a company doing condominium management, and then associate, which would be the frontline condominium managers. So on our website, under the condominium management tab, you can find the effort. If you haven't seen it yet, you can find the document. It's a 2-page document, and the affirmation is quite straightforward. I've chopped it into a couple of pieces here so that you can see them on the screen. Part A is just your personal identification. Part B is your work history. So Part B asks you to list up to 5 of your most recent condominium corporations that you've dealt with as a condo manager. And so if you have 5, then complete the information on 5. We want a contact name for the corporation that you dealt with and their phone number. If it's in order to, if you're providing some information on condo corporations that you managed some time ago, and you no longer have the contact name and phone number, just put not available at this point in time and submit it that way. So it's up to 5. Some people are concerned because they may have only managed 1, 2, or 3 condo corporations, but they have done that for 2 or more years. And again, we're now changing that from 2 or more years down to 75 days or more. So in this particular instance, if you've been involved with managing a condo corporation for 75 days or more, you would complete the information. If it's only 1, then that's fine. Just fill out the 1. There's not a requirement. You don't have to have 5. Just fill out what you're able to. Section C would apply to a person applying for a condominium management broker or associate broker's license. So they have to establish that they have in fact been managing a condominium management company for a total of 2 or more years. So in that instance, they would fill out the company that they're currently working for and the number of years, and then any other companies that they may have been involved in managing the company and the number of years. Again, it could just be one company that they've managed for 2+ years, or maybe they've just owned and managed one company for 25 years. Either way, that meets the requirement. At the bottom in section D, this section is the declaration. So this is basically you're ticking off and saying that everything you've provided is accurate and true to the best of your knowledge, and you acknowledge that providing false information could result in sanctions. So you'd sign this off, scan it, and turn it into an electronic document, and then that's what you would be uploading to the RECA, Myrica website. So as I mentioned, the upload screen looks like this. So you can either select a file and download it, or you can drag and drop into the square. And once you've done that, you would continue on to the next step in the process. So the next screen you would see after you've uploaded something, again, you're in your own personal account. And for condominium manager eligibility, there were 2 things that you need to upload. In this example of screen, it's showing that you have submitted your affirmation. It's not approved, it's just simply showing as submitted. So it's waiting for a RECA licensing officer to deal with this, look at it, make sure that it meets the requirements. And then the supporting documentation in this example has not yet been uploaded. But once it's uploaded, again, it would show as submitted. And then once it's been reviewed and approved, it would be show as approved, and then in the system, the Myrica system, the document that you provided for your photo ID would be deleted at that point. So this process is, as I said, is very self-evident, that you can just look at it and see what's required. The system tells you all the time what the status is. Each time there's a change made, you'll get an email telling you that something has changed on your Myrica site. So for instance, once this affirmation has been approved, then it will be changed to approved, and you get notice that there's a change been made, and you can go in and check in your system to see it. So one of the things that happens from time to time is when affirmations are submitted, they're incomplete. So the licensing officer would contact you and ask you to resubmit it with more information. In some cases, the licensing officer may not be sure if what you've submitted meets the requirements. And if it does happen in that case, they would check with their manager in the licensing department, or it may come to me to look at and determine whether or not it meets the eligibility requirements. If I have any concerns about what you've provided, then I would contact you directly and discuss it with you. And if there's changes or more information required, then I would get you to do that and resubmit it. We do try to follow through on all of this, and mistakes happen from time to time, or sometimes people are confused, and if that does happen, then we try to correct that in the system so that there's not a delay in you being able to get licensed. So once everything is submitted, in this particular case, it's now showing condominium management eligibility has been submitted, and it takes you to, you can check on view here, but you'll receive an email that it's in that process in the system. So now I'm going to switch so I've gone over setting up a new account in Myrica. I've gone over eligibility process that you see as a new applicant, brand new to the regulated industry. And thirdly, I went over applications for a person who's already licensed with RECA and is making an application, going to be making an application for a license in condominium management, and the eligibility process involved for them. So now this next couple of screens is about the actual application that you make that can take place after October 12th. So remember that as an individual condominium manager associate, you will not be able to make application for a license from October 12th onward until your broker has made application and been approved, and the brokerage has made application and been approved. Once those two things are done, then their account is established in the Myrica system, and then you're in a position to get licensed as an individual. All licenses that take place in October and November come into effect on December the 1st of 2021. So when you sign in for the license application process, this is the associate's account. So this is when you sign in, what you would see under your account, current licenses, and this would say condominium management. License status would say eligible for licensing. So you'd have this would be lit up saying you are eligible for licensing as an associate. Or if you've been eligibilized as a broker or associate broker, it would say condominium management, license status, eligible for license as broker or associate broker. And industry, it'll say condominium management. So this process is very straightforward. You would not be able to move forward with applying for a license unless this is giving you the green light for, for moving forward as a eligible person. So the next step you come to would be under a broker's account. So as an associate if you're eligible, and you can tell your broker that you're ready for licensing. So the broker would sign into their account. Now, a broker account looks different than an associate's account in that it has an extra tab that associates do not have. So brokers have a tab that says My Brokerage. Also, if the broker has approved other people for access, then they will so they may approve somebody they've delegated, an associate broker, to help them with managing the company, for instance. They may approve them to have certain functions on the system. They may approve a senior administrator to have certain functions, and they would also have this My Brokerage tab and be able to see more information. But an associate will not see this. So the broker, now knowing that you are licensed, can go into their system, click on the tab for My Brokerage, click on My People, and it'll show a list of people licensed with that brokerage. So for condominium brokerages, they'll all be brand new. So when they start out, the only person that will show up when the broker opens this will be themselves, the broker's information. As they add people to the system, the other associates licensed or associate brokers licensed with the brokerage will show on the system. So to get somebody on into the system, they have to add the associate. So if your eligibility on your Myrica account shows that you're now eligible, the broker can click on Add Associate. And when they click on Add Associate, it takes them to the next screen. And the broker is going to pull your information into their Myrica. So they have to pull you in through your username. And I mentioned earlier that the username is important because it's unique. So when they pull up you through your username, the only person that should show would be you, because there's no duplicates. So so you would provide the broker with your username. The broker would search on that username. Up would pop the information for you. The broker would verify, yep, that's what I'm looking for. And they would hit select. And when they hit select, it brings them to the next step in the process. So the our detailed instructions again as the broker goes through this process. And the first notification they get when they click accept on the previous screen, they get this notice saying that the application has been sent, or a notice has been sent to the application that you have done that first step. So you would close out with this, and you would wait for the associate, the condominium manager associate, to complete the next step in the process. So here is the associates screen. So now we're going back. The associate has gotten an email that the broker has approved them to start the licensing process with the brokerage. So you as an associate would go into your Myrica account, click on your applications. It would show here condominium management, new license and registration, and assigned to the applicant. So it's saying you have to do something. And actions, you can either cancel the application if you weren't going to go forward, but most people, of course, are going to go forward. So they would you would click on complete. So this is the associate under their applications for condominium management. As an applicant for a license, they would click complete, and it would take them to the next screen on their account. So it first asks the associate to confirm that all this information that they provided is correct. So you would click yes, it's all correct. It takes you to the next screen that gives you an explanation. Again, it's the questions that tie into eligibility. If you click no, then it just skips on to the next step. If you click yes, then the system is going to ask for more information. So you can see that, have you been refused a license, registration, or authorization of any kind by another regulatory body? Have you withdrawn, received a lifetime ban or of any license, etc., with another regulatory body? Have you been fined or sanctioned or disciplined by a professional occupation, trade, or association, etc.? So there's a whole list of these questions that you would complete, click off the appropriate answer. If you click a yes, like I say, the system will ask you for more information. So once you've gone through that process, you're going to do the acknowledgement on your account. So you would read the various acknowledgements and click them off and go next. And then you would have your declaration. And on the declaration, again, it's you click off that you've read and understand, and you've provided all this information that's true and accurate, blah, blah, blah. And you would click next. And then when you're done, you would submit. So it's saying, once you've done everything you're supposed to do properly, because the system won't let you go forward unless everything's been done properly, it says your application is complete. And once you hit submit, it sends the information to your broker. So it's going to tell your broker that you've completed the information that you're required to provide the broker and the system. And so that goes to the broker. Now, the broker, once they get a message, they can go back into their account again under My Brokerage Applications. And now they're going to see under Other Applications, they're going to say there's a new license and registration submitted to the brokerage, and they can click complete. They'll see who the name of the person is, and they'll click complete. And once they do that, up will show the information for that person. So they've review this, that they're satisfied with it, and that is who they're talking to. The information matches up with the person that they've agreed to hire with and license at their brokerage. And then the next step, they get to see all the questions that you have been asked in your application and what your responses were. So if your answer was no to all of these, then it's simple to move on. If your answer is yes to any of these, then the broker has to look at that issue and decide whether or not they still want to proceed. So if you show here, for instance, that you've had a criminal investigation or proceedings or been charged with a criminal offense, then, and that says yes, and you haven't talked to them about that in your history, then they may want to talk to you about that before they proceed. On the bankruptcy question, this one here, bankruptcy, insolvency, or receivership proceeding. Again, if you've clicked yes, and it's just been a simple personal bankruptcy, for instance, then typically the broker in most cases won't be concerned about that. And they can accept you as a licensee, having said yes, because it's RECA that determines at the end of the day whether the license is applicable or not. So, but this brings to attention all these issues to the broker, so that if they have any questions or want to discuss them further with you, they have that opportunity to do that before they proceed with finalizing your licensing with their brokerage. So after that step is done, the brokers ask the question, do you accept this application? Yes or no? Typically, they're going to say yes and click yes. So once they do that, the broker, again, they have to do an acknowledgement. They've reviewed and discussed with the applicant their responses to the suitability questions. They've discussed the consequences of providing false or misleading responses, and they've reviewed the identification to confirm the person that is applying is in fact the person that they're going to have working from their brokerage. So you just click next on that, and now that takes you to the payment screen. So different brokerages have different policies. In real estate, there are some brokerages that choose to pay the registration and licensing. In some cases, the brokerage pays for it at the end of the day. In other cases, the brokerage charges it, they pay for it up front, but then they charge it back to the associate. We don't have a handle at the moment on what will be typical amongst most condominium management brokerages. That's the decision of the business model of the brokerage. But if the brokerage is going to pay for it, then they would do the drop down that would be the brokerage paying for it. If the associate is to pay for it, then they would drop this down and click on the associate and then hit complete. And then if the brokerage is going to pay for it, then it'll go to a payment screen for the brokerage. If they click for the associate to pay for it, then they hit complete, and the system will notify the associate that they have to go into their Myrica and pay for their licensing. And then the broker it'll also be in the broker's Myrica that its payment is pending and the license isn't approved until the payment has been made. So in the broker's account, if the broker's going to pay for it, they can simply, they see the charges. These are real estate ones, so you can ignore them. They're not the same as what they would be for condominium management. But if the broker wants to do it as a bulk payment for everybody they're licensing with their brokerage, they can just simply add it to the bulk payment list. So what would happen if they were doing that? So let's say a brokerage has six, there's a broker plus six frontline condominium managers. And they get them all in the system, get everything approved except for the payment, then they could have all the payments for the six condominium managers waiting in the bulk payment file. And then once they're at that stage, sometime by December 1st, the broker would simply go in and to the bulk payment and pay the fees, the total fees due. And once they do that, then all the applications under that brokerage would be changed from pending to approved. And each of those associates would get an email notifying them. And then their accounts, their Myrica accounts, would show as them having been finalized or licensing being finalized. So if they're, again, if somebody's been approved and no suitability issues, this is in the broker's account, assuming the payment received and no suitability issues, they're at this stage. It would show before the payment's complete. Once the payment's complete, then in the associates Myrica account under current licenses, the license status for condominium management would change and say they're authorized with a green light for an associate level license in condominium management. So highly recommend that any person getting licensed before they actually start doing condominium management from December 1st onward, go into their Myrica account and double check to make sure that they have been authorized or approved and that their license is final. Brokers should also do the same thing on December 1st and check, or before if they've got it finalized before then, and double check to make sure everybody that they're hiring on in a licensed capacity is in the Myrica system and showing as licensed. You don't want to be in a situation where somebody thought they were licensed and they start practicing and providing condominium management services, and then it comes to light months later that their license was never finalized, and now they're in a situation where they were practicing without a license, and that could lead to sanctions. Now, through this process, I mentioned that there was the criminal record check, and this is a subject or an issue that's often misunderstood. A certified criminal record check is not the same as going to your local police force and getting a check done in order to work with youth or other people that are in some way disadvantaged or compromised. So you cannot go to your local police station and get the typical check that people get for sporting activities or to work at a nursing home or those types of things. You have to have it done through the National RCMP database in Ottawa. And in order to do that, you must make application through a location in Alberta. So you have to go to one of the approved locations in Alberta. So if you go to the RECA website under licensing, you will see there is the information and a drop down that gives a lot of detail around criminal record checks, including a list of the places in Alberta you can go to. So there's lots of places throughout the province. It's fairly convenient, and or you can check the RCMP website as well. So when you do a criminal record check, there are three components to this to make sure that who they're doing the check on is you, the person making application for a license. So they're going to do fingerprints. They want your full legal name, because that will be part of the check, and your birth date. So you have to provide those three things. So birth date is fairly simple. the fingerprints will be fairly simple in getting those done. But one of the things that can cause problems is if you don't provide your full legal name. So, so an example would be somebody that has multiple middle names, for instance. So let's say you were given a first name, 3 middle names, and a last name. When you make application for a criminal record check, you have to include all 5 pieces of your name. If you have changed your name legally, so you've made application and legally changed your name, then that's the name that you need to provide to do the criminal record check. If you have gotten married, again, that's now your full legal name if it changed as a result of getting married. So all 3 things here have to be complete as part of the certified criminal record check. So persons who are currently licensed with RECA won't have to have a criminal record check done, and will have to provide a government ID, and they may have to provide other documentations if it's appropriate. I will mention you should have the criminal record check mailed directly to the real estate counsel, not to yourself. That way it comes to RECA unopened, and then RECA is able to open the envelope that came from the RCMP and see the record check and know it's authentic. If it goes to you and you open the envelope, you have now made that criminal record check invalid, and you would have to have it redone. So if by chance a mistake is made and the record check comes to you, do not open the envelope. If you get an envelope from the RCMP, most of us don't receive envelopes very often from the RCMP. So if you get one that you weren't expecting, do not open the envelope. Put the envelope in another envelope and mail it to the real estate counsel. If, as I said, you open it, you now have a problem that you have to start the process over again. Very important with criminal record check that if you have to have one done, so if you've not been licensed with RECA, or if you've been licensed with RECA previously but have not been active with your license for more than a year, then you need to do a criminal record check. They can take up to a couple of months to get back from the RCMP depending on how busy they are. So if you have to have a criminal record check done, I strongly recommend you start it as soon as possible so that it's in place well before December 1st. So the next few slides are for people who are, again, their company is new to RECA and they're going to be opening a brokerage brand new to the real estate council, and this process, you don't have to open if you're currently operating a real estate brokerage, then you're going to be opening a second brokerage through this process. So you will be doing the same process that you did when you opened the original brokerage if you were involved with that, but you will be doing it through your Myrica account. So to open the brokerage, you would follow the steps. Again, it's step by step, and there's help as you go through the process, and there's also the tutorial on the RECA website. So the very first thing to do is you would click on, this is again on only shows up on a broker's screen because it's only a broker that's eligible to open a brokerage. So you would click on apply to open a brokerage. Again, you have to have been eligibilized previously to have a broker's license, and you have 2 or more years experience as a broker. And so you'd click on this button, and that would take you to the next slide or to the next page within Myrica. So you would first confirm the information that shows on that screen, so that you have the instructions, and then followed by a screen with the information about you. And then that's followed by some questions. So one of the questions is about ownership. So if a broker owns a brokerage fully, it's not an issue. But if a broker is not the controlling interest of a brokerage, then whoever represents the corporation that has the controlling interest, so it could be a president or chairperson of the company or corporation that owns a brokerage, they would have to sign off on a form that says that they will allow the broker to carry out their functions under the Real Estate Act and the rules in the operation of a condominium management brokerage, and they will not interfere with that broker's ability to carry out their function as a broker. So that has to be in place, because we can't have somebody that's not licensed or doesn't hold the qualification of a broker instructing the broker how to meet the regulatory requirements. It's the broker's responsibility alone. So that document has to be uploaded. As well, you have to upload the legal name of the entity. So you've registered the name you're going to use under the Companies Act, and also what type of company, whether it's a proprietorship or a corporation, for instance. And then you get a couple of questions like, is your brokerage a franchise? And I'm not familiar with any franchises in the condominium world at the moment, but it's quite common in the real estate world, of course. So if in fact your brokerage was a franchise, then you would have to upload the portion of your franchise document that gives you the legal ability to use the franchise name in your brokerage name. And there's a question also, does your trade name contain a domain name? And it's gotten to be a more common thing now for some companies to use a domain name as their company name. And that's fine with us if it meets the requirements and you own the domain name. So you would have to provide, if that was the case, you'd have to provide the legal document saying that you own that domain name. Then you'd provide information on your brokerage, so the different things. So your corporate name, your trade name, if you're doing business as a different name. So if you have a numbered company and then you're doing business as XYZ Condominium Management, your email, phone number, etc. You tell us what your fiscal year is and what type of brokerage. So in your case, this would not apply because you'll all be, I believe, common law brokerages. So you would not be practicing as a designated agency brokerage. You'd be practicing as a common law brokerage. Next is the business address information, and business address has to be a physical location in the province of Alberta. It cannot be a post office box. You can have any place where you're legally allowed to have a business address, operate a business. So, most people have an office of some kind somewheres, but you could be from your home, for instance, if you desire, as long as you're legally able in your municipality to operate a business from your home. So if you meet those requirements, use your home address. If you have an office address, use your office address. And then that's followed by, if your mailing address is different than your office location, you'd provide that information. And storage of your financial records. That has to be indicated. Again, access to your financial records has to be available to us, to RECA, in Alberta. So if they're physically being kept, and whether they're in your office or in a storage location within Alberta, that's fine. If you're doing electronic maintenance of records and storage, that's fine as well. But access to the records has to be made available in Alberta to those electronic records. They may be stored somewhere else, a copy of them, but a copy must be available to RECA in Alberta. And then you'd read the various questions that are here, and it's the same. It's very similar to applying for other licenses. It's self-explanatory, and there's drop downs or answers you have to answer. And if there's information you have to provide, you would upload it. There's the acknowledgements that are pretty straightforward, and your acknowledgements will be a little different than the ones shown here, because the ones you will have will be specific to condominium management. And then once you've gone through that process, there's the declaration, again, the same as on the others. And then you would click, after clicking yes, you'd hit next. and that will bring you to paying the fee. So in the case of condominium management brokerages, all condominium management brokerages applying for a license, RECA has waived the application review fee. Again, because those companies and current brokerages providing condominium management don't have any choice in becoming a condominium management brokerage if they want to continue to practice. So because you're being required to do that, it's not an option, then we've waived that fee for you. So you would go through the payment options. So you would hit complete, and you get notice that everything's again been complete. So after that, if you were to check your Myrica account, so again, the broker would click on their brokerage tab, My Applications. It'll say condominium management in this case, new brokerage application, the status, waiting for details, and then it says complete. Well, it's waiting for details from the applicant. So again, it's very self-evident. It's a new brokerage application waiting for details from the applicant. So you would hit complete here. And when you hit complete, it brings you to the screen that for all the uploads of anything that you need to upload. So a management agreement, if the broker doesn't have majority control of the brokerage, things like the corporate summary, if it's a corporation, the franchise agreement, domain name, all these, which ones are going to apply to a condominium management brokerage will show on the list here. It says they're waiting for details. You would upload the document. So each time you upload a document, it will change from upload to submitted. And then once the document has been reviewed by RECA staff, and the document meets the requirements, then it would change from submitted to approved. So once you get to this stage, with all the documents uploaded and everything's approved, you're going to see here condominium management, new brokerage, licensing fees, waiting for payment. And here it would say condominium management, new brokerage application review is approved. So the only thing that's left at this stage is payment of the fee for the brokerage licensing. So again, you would pay the fee for the brokerage. These other fees will not be there for you. It'll just be the brokerage fee, and you would click on it, and then you would make the payment for the brokerage fee, and you get an answer back here telling you that the payment has been received, and you'll get confirmation by email, and your brokerage is authorized. So again, this is, like I told you before, very important for you to go in after that and check that, in fact, it shows here under My Brokerage, under this tab, it'll say condominium management, license status, authorized, industry, condominium management, and the expiry date will be September 30th of 2022. So that takes you through the process for a brand new brokerage, which every condominium management company, whether they're currently licensed with RECA or not, will have to go through that process. There's a schedule on the RECA website. If you were to go on the RECA website and do a search for licensing fees, look up the link on the site for where the licensing fees are posted. This is just part of the fees. So you can see here for license registration, application review, and amendment fees. So they're all on the schedule, but for what's important for you at this point in time is the condominium management. So a brokerage fee for a new licensee, a brand new brokerage, which will be all the brokerages going into condominium management effective December 1st, is $450. And then the fees for the individuals is $475. So anybody who's not currently licensed at all with RECA and is getting a condominium management license will pay $475 for their license. The people who are currently licensed and have paid their fees, typically in real estate up here, they will not have to repay the fee. That if they renewed by September 30th, then they have this license in effect. And if they're going to be changing their license over from real estate to condominium management, there won't be a fee for that. However, if they're adding condominium management and keeping their real estate license, any of these licenses, if they're keeping those, then they will end up having to pay this fee, $475, for a new condominium management license that will be in addition to the other licenses that they currently hold. So as I say, you can go to the RECA website and you'll get the full schedule for fees. So that brings me to the end of the formal presentation. Here is all my contact information, and I can only stress, if you have questions or need clarification after I've dealt with questions today, please feel free to either email me or phone me. I would much rather that you get the correct information directly from RECA rather than have to listen to something that you hear either through somebody else in the industry or through the grapevine that may or may not be correct. And then if it is incorrect, you end up going down the wrong road. Much better to get it directly from RECA. So you can call Information Services or call me directly. I'm only too happy to talk to you about it. And another caution is that there's still other things in play. So we have not seen the final rules approved by the minister. We have not yet seen the exemption regulation that will specify who is exempt from licensing. RECA submitted both of those documents to Service Alberta, and as soon as they've been approved by Service Alberta, we will be distributing that information to everybody in the industry, that of the final rules and the exemption regulation. And as far as courses, we still do not know when courses will be available, but as soon as they are, communications will go out on that. And then, as also when the exam challenges will be available to people who choose to start first with an exam challenge. So it's still a little bit of a work in process, but we believe all the pieces will fit together prior to December 1st. But don't be shy about asking questions, or if you have concerns about anything, or you're not sure about whether you or somebody in your brokerage is eligible under certain circumstances, and again, feel free to call and ask that question. So I'm now going to open this to the floor for questions, and Kelly Satnova, who is our communications officer that's online with us for this session, has been monitoring the questions and answers, and she's going to bring up the questions. There may be multiple questions on the same issue that she'll summarize in as one, but she'll bring up the question, and hopefully I'm able to provide the right answer. So go away, Shelley.
Hello, everybody, and good morning. So I've been getting to some of these questions, just typing answers, some to you privately for those scenarios that are more personal in nature. And then I've publicly answered a few that would sort of apply to everybody. But we'll start at the top here for you, Doug. So people want to know, is the 75 days appropriate for the experience requirement? This one's from Nawaz Damji, and I apologize to everybody in advance if I'm mispronouncing your names. I'll do my very best. So yeah, just asking about that 75-day experience. Doug, maybe you can speak to that.
Well, I'll just back up a little bit in that initially the council approved that people had to have 2 years minimum experience in order to be approved for a conditional license. If they had less than 2 years, there was going to be a requirement that they had to complete the appropriate courses and exams prior to getting a license. Then, as things moved along, we had originally hoped that courses might be available by October at the latest, but prior to December 1st, so that if there were people with less than 2 years experience, in order for them to be able to continue to work, they would have to complete the course and exam prior to December 1st. But that's no longer an option for people because of various delays. The courses are not expected to be available until at least November, and that is not fair to applicants if they're working full-time in condominium management and having to do one or more courses and exams in that last month or weeks prior to licensing. And they would have been unable to practice as a condominium manager as of December 1st. So, so what council decided was they would go with 75 days, which we're now coming into prior to the December 1st date. And that would mean take anybody with less than 2 years. So we're typically talking about people probably that have 6 months, a year and a half experience, will be able to get a conditional license. The safeguard is that if somebody has the very minimum, let's say 75 days, and they've had minimum training through their brokerage or current company, they're not going to be in a position to pass an exam and just get a permanent license without conditions, without taking the appropriate course. So we expect is likely going to happen in most people's cases that have minimal experience is that they're going to have to take fundamentals course and practices course prior to writing the exam. And we also would expect that brokers of condominium management brokerages will be overseeing these people as new licensees and supervising them in a much more direct way starting out than if they have, certainly if they're experienced with 2 or more years experience in the industry.
Great, thanks, Doug. Hopefully that answers your question. And then we have quite a few questions, so I'll just kind of group them together, but really about the reasoning behind a property management brokerage having to create a separate brokerage for their condo management portion of their portfolio, now that both licenses are under RECA now. So I'd actually, Doug, if you don't mind, I'll read an excerpt from an article we just developed the other day that kind of clarifies this, and then you can add anything on top of it if you like. But under the Real Estate Act, condominium management is a separate activity and a separate industry from property management, and it boils down to the relationship. So condo managers enter relationships with condo boards and perform condominium management activities on behalf of their client boards. And condo management is about helping the condominium corporation to manage itself. Whereas property management, it enters relationships with landlords, renters, negotiating leases, holding rental security deposits, and performing leasing related activities for their landlord and renter clients. So while property management is about the disposition or acquisition of an interest in real estate through some form of lease. So Doug, did you have anything to add?
Well, this is an interesting topic, and if we were to go back 6 years ago, the Real Estate Council and the Implementation Advisory Committee that was formed did a consultation with industry on the structure of what condominium management industry would look like. So that was all done back around 2015, 2016, and they went out and got input from industry and from stakeholder organizations like CCI South and North and ACMA, the Condominium Owners Forum, and other stakeholders, as well as, of course, all the people that work in the condominium management industry. And the bulk of the feedback at that time that we got was that condominium management is very different from property management and should be separate from property management. And then when we did the more recent consultation on the rules about a year and a half ago, it was quite a detailed consultation, and the consultation was done publicly, and we also brought in all the stakeholders as well. And we received much of the same feedback at that time, saying that they were very different businesses and that they should be separate. So it's always interesting when people, say that they're not, and that they can both be done through the same brokerage. And, you know, they might have been able to be done through the same brokerage, but most of the rules that apply to condominium management are very specific to condominium management and are different from those that apply on the property management or real estate side. So that's the decision that was made by the previous real estate council. And then under the new governance structure with the residential property management council, they had an opportunity to look at all of this as well, and they endorsed the structure that was moving forward to remain. So that's why we are where we are today.
All right, thanks, Doug. We've got a question from Kristen Soyunmez. If we are self-managed in a one-person show, do we need to hire a broker, or how exactly does it work for self-managed condos? In my building, there is a CMA. Does that person need to have a broker?
So I'm assuming the CMA does the bookkeeping for the condo corporation, and that would not be a licensed activity from our perspective. And if the condo corporation is self-managed, so if the condo board of directors for that corporation is managing it and they're not using a third party, then they would be exempt. So condo corporation boards of directors are already exempt through the Real Estate Act and the Condominium Property Act for self-management. It's the exemption regulation that I mentioned earlier will deal with other unusual situations like trustees, etc., that could be exempt from licensing. But a fully self-managed condominium corporation is exempt from licensing.
Great. Okay, thanks. And Darcy Liria is asking, what duties performed by an admin staff would trigger the need to be licensed as an associate?
So I would reverse that and say, if you look at the definition of condominium management, and if a person is doing any of those activities, they require a license. If the activity is not one of those activities, then it likely won't require a license. So in most cases, bookkeepers, accountants, general administrators, reception staff, even assistants to condominium managers, because I know there are some brokerages that do large volumes of business, and sometimes a manager will have an assistant. If they're not carrying out condominium management activities, they won't require a license. Something we're currently working on that we will probably publish sometime in the next month is an information bulletin that we will send out to all the people in the condominium management world that will specifically detail what activities require a license and what activities would not require a license. So we have that now. If you look on our website, you'll see it there for real estate, for what assistants and administrators can or cannot do. So we'll be providing the same thing for the condominium management world.
Great, thanks. Mark Mealy asks, it's a follow-up on this previous question, where is the line between a self-managed corporation that hires a manager but is unlicensed and acting as an unlicensed condominium manager?
Well, until we see the exemption regulation, I can't give a sort of a final answer to that around whether or not. One of the things we don't know for sure is, would a condominium corporation be able to hire a person as an employee to assist the board in managing that corporation, if that person would or would not be exempt. But outside of that, I mean, a board would not be able to pay somebody who's not licensed in general to assist them in managing the corporation. If they did, that person who they've hired is providing condominium management services without a license and could be subject to quite significant sanctions for doing that.
Great, thanks. We've got here, sorry. Sorry, I lost my place here. A lot of questions coming in. Okay, we'll go with this one here. When we finally get licensed, this is from Jeremy Graham. When we finally get licensed, will the same measures be in place annually for recertification? Understand that courses required for condo managers under the real estate license were not in the scope for condominium subjects.
Well, so for all the people that get licensed starting December 1st onward, including new applicants who take courses and get licensed later in 2022, when we come up to August of next year, then condominium management licenses will all be part of the license renewal process. So we open usually around mid-August, we open renewals for the next licensing year. And so there will be 3 industries we'll be doing that for next August. And that will be real estate, condominium management, and mortgage brokerage. So all licenses that have been issued anytime prior to that September 30th will be up for renewal. And so all your condominium management licenses for your brokerages and for the individuals will have to be renewed by September 30th in order to be able to continue activities on October 1st of 2022. The application process for renewal is much simpler. So you won't go through all the eligibility process. You will get asked a few questions. For instance, in the last year, have you gone through a bankruptcy proceeding? In the last year, have you gone through a criminal proceeding or been found guilty of any criminal charges? So there'll be that kind of thing where you answer a few questions as part of the license renewal and then pay your fees, and typically you would be renewed. All people who join condominium management brokerages brand new people after December 1st will have to go through the normal education process of taking the fundamentals course and the practices course and passing both the exams, and of course going through the eligibility process, and they get their license, and then they would go through the regular renewal process next year. As for continuing education courses or professional development, every year RECA decides what industries or licenses will be required to do some form of continuing education that has to be required typically by the time renewals come up. So that is usually announced sometime in the January, February timeframe at the latest, so that people have 7 or 8 months to complete the courses prior to licensing. So we've had various courses for mortgage brokers and for real estate associates over the years. We've had courses specific to brokers, for instance, as continuing education. And at some point, whether it happens for next year or the year after, I expect that there will be continuing education courses happen for the condominium management industry as well, because it's very important that people in the profession keep up to date with changes and issues. And of course, after we've been licensing and regulating the condominium management industry for a year, we'll have a much greater sense of where the weaknesses are and the issues are that are problematic within the industry. And then we can design continuing education that targets those issues specifically in hopes of improving the professionalism of the condominium management industry long term. So there will be courses for people who get licensed as condominium managers. There will down the road be continuing education courses or professional development.
Great. Okay, on the same vein as the education here, Maureen Laszlo wants to clarify again that the education requirement to apply for the conditional license for condo managers has been removed from the requirement, or she's asking if she heard that wrong.
The course.
So I think she's asking about just the initial education requirement to apply for the conditional license. So you just
like
explained what it looks like.
I think she's maybe talking about high school certificate or diploma.
Yeah, perhaps she is talking about that. And not the actual, like the conditional license is not, as you just said, is conditional on completing that education the following year, the pre-licensing education. Perhaps she is asking about the removal of the high school. I'm not sure if that was in there in the first place. Do you know, Doug?
Yeah, so normally an applicant, so after December 1st, any applicants who apply for a condominium management license or are going to, they will have to go through the eligibility process and then take the courses and then apply for the license. So before they're eligible, they'll have to go through that approval process. And after December 1st for condominium management, the eligibility process will include all the things that I discussed in this presentation, ability to work in Canada, and all those types of things. But it will include the requirement that they have to provide their high school certificate or higher, and they'll also have to prove English language proficiency. So those two things.
But if they're already licensed with RECA, do they still need to provide that proof?
So people who are currently licensed with RECA and applying for a condo license don't have to. They've already done that as part of their current license. And people who are applying for a license for December 1st who are currently unlicensed, that requirement, because they're already practicing in the industry, that requirement has been waived for them. So nobody that's going to be issued a conditional license for December 1st will be required to provide a high school diploma or better or English proficiency. That will only come back into effect for condominium management licensing for new applicants after December 1st.
Awesome. Okay, I hope that clears that up. Jason Anger asks, how does the process work for a new hire who is intended to become a frontline manager but does not have the 75-day requirement? Can they assist another manager until they meet all of the requirements?
So the answer would be yes, if they're not carrying out licensed activities. So if they're helping prepare reports, mail outs, research information, research other services and service providers to provide that information to the condo manager, they can do all those types of activities until they are licensed.
Great. Okay. And then I'm going to read both of these questions together because they're sort of, I think the answer will be the same. So the first by Kristen Soya Munez again. As a condo manager working with a self-managed condominium corporation, am I able to obtain an associate license without being under a brokerage firm or a broker? And then Ricky Hoym asked a similar question. Our condominium is managed by our board. There is no brokerage involved. Because can one of the board members become licensed without involvement in a brokerage? So those are two questions about becoming licensed, but not being in a brokerage or under a broker.
So I'll answer the second one first. If a board wanted one of their board members to be licensed, they'd still have to be licensed with a brokerage. You can't hold a license by itself. So they would have to be licensed with a brokerage. Now, if a board member decided, and if they were doing self-management of a board, and the board member wanted to take the education in order to be more knowledgeable and be able to help their board, be in a better position, get better advice, and know what all the different issues are that they need to deal with, they certainly, anybody can take the courses and not have to get licensed. So that is an option open to them as if they choose to do that, but it would not be a single person under that board with a license. They'd have to be with a licensed brokerage. In the first question, if I heard it right, the person is asking, can they get licensed as an associate without having to be licensed through a brokerage? And it's not possible for anybody for any of the license categories, broker, or associate, to be licensed. The license cannot exist without it being held by a brokerage.
Aaron Burney asks, can an individual be licensed as both a broker and an associate?
There's no requirement for that because a broker holds the same as all the requirements that an associate holds, plus the requirements required of a manager supervising the operation of a brokerage. So there would be no advantage to somebody holding two different licenses in the same industry. They would stick typically with the higher license that they hold.
That's right. Greg McAmmond asks, do each of the brokerages require separate operating accounts?
So how you deal with operating accounts within your situation is up to you. If you're holding funds on behalf of condominium corporations, then only the condominium corporation broker or condominium management brokerage, sorry, can hold those funds. And they would have to have separate trust accounts for each of the condo corporations. So an operating account and a reserve fund account for each brokerage that they're holding funds for. But as far as the general operating account for the brokerage's own bill paying and whatnot, we don't regulate that operating account. That's up to the brokerages to how they work that.
Great, thanks, Doug. Okay, I just want to do a quick check-in on time here. We're sitting at 8:12, but we've still got quite a few questions to work through here. So I say we just keep going, and I mean, people can drop off if they need to, but we'll try and get to most of the questions here. And if we don't get to your question, rest assured we'll take a look at it and we'll get back to you personally after the live session here.
Yeah, works for me.
There are some requirements for a high school diploma or equivalent. There are many people who didn't complete high school but went on to further education as a mature student. Is there a condition for this?
It's a non-issue because they don't have to provide that information. So.
Okay, great. Let me just see here. Okay, so will real estate brokerages, this is from Nikki O'Grady, will real estate brokerages need to develop a separate brokerage for PM work as well down the road with separate licensing fees for PM work, such as what was done with condo managers now?
So if a condominium, if a company that's not licensed as in real estate today gets a condominium management license, but down the road they choose to expand the services they provide and want to get into either sales, leasing, or property management, then yes, it would be the reverse of what we're doing today. They would have their condominium management brokerage and licensees established, and they would open a separate brokerage in real estate for property management or whatever real estate services they were going to offer.
Great, thanks, Doug. For associate licenses, this is from Amanda Henry. For associate licenses, who can challenge the exams without taking the fundamentals and practice courses, and who must take the courses before they're able to sit the exams?
So for anybody that qualifies, so for anybody that has 75 days or more experience going into applying for a conditional license, in all of those instances, they're being treated differently on this issue with regards to the normal flow. Because the normal flow for a person, so new people who are applying that have between, if they aren't already working as a condominium manager, the window for 75 days is now closing. So if you hire somebody in a month's time, let's say you hire somebody in October or November, then they're going to have to go through the eligibility process. They're going to have to go through the take the courses, do the exams. Once they've completed all of that, then they would be eligible for a license application. But because we're requiring, the government is requiring an industry that already exists, that's unregulated, to become a regulated industry, we're having to change this process to be fair to people that have been working in this industry. So if you have 75 days or more experience as of December 1st, you will get a conditional license if you've met the eligibility requirements of the experience and you've provided the other information that's required in that eligibility process. So once you'll get a conditional license. So everybody will get a conditional license. Everybody that gets any form of a condominium management license will have at least one exam to challenge. So whether they're licensed today or not, everybody's going to have to do the condominium management practices exam And if they're not successful in that, they'll take the course, or if they choose, they can take the course first and then do the exam. But every single person that gets a conditional license as of December 1st will be required at a minimum to do that one. So people that are licensed currently as associates won't have to do the fundamentals course because they already have that credit on their licensing profile. So they'll only have to do the condominium practices. But people who are currently licensed as brokers or associate brokers don't have to do the fundamentals or the broker's course, because again, they have those on their profile, but they will have to do the condominium practices. For all the people who are currently unlicensed and have 75 days or more experience, associates will have to do the challenge of both the fundamentals and the practices exam, and brokers will have to do fundamentals, practices, and brokers. So it varies, but everybody's going to have at least one exam challenge. And depending on your status and your background, could have 2 or 3.
Great, thanks, Doug. Okay, quite a few questions here on each of these topics. So generally, we'll go with John David D'Souza, who just wants to follow up on the previous question asked by somebody else. Can you confirm that a high school diploma is not required for individuals to be licensed as associates in the field of condo management? So yeah, just a blanket. So is that high school diploma? We're getting a lot, and so it's tough when we're receiving these questions because we don't know if these individuals are licensed with us already or not. And we also don't know if they have that 75 days of experience or not. So maybe you can just clarify that one more time, please.
So anybody that qualifies for a conditional license, whether they're unlicensed or licensed today, as of December 1st, if they have 75 days or more condominium management experience, there will be no requirement for a high school certificate.
Great. Okay. The other questions we have here are surrounding ID. So Eileen Kuchilnia, as for the eligibility, I have been in the business for over 10 years. I have submitted the government ID, and now RECA is asking for a birth certificate and marriage license. Why do I have to submit this?
Well, because one, it's part of the process of proving who you are, the birth certificate, and if you've been married and you've changed your name, then they want the marriage certificate to prove that you've in fact legally changed your name. There's lots of people out there that use a different name than their real name. We see it most predominantly with Eastern Europeans and Asians, and it's usually got to do with names that are difficult to spell or pronounce, right, Shelley?
Yeah, I don't know anything about that.
So we see lots of people that have shortened their name, and they may have done it, decades ago. We see people, it's not uncommon, for instance, for people from Asia that have a Chinese ethnic background. It's quite common from Singapore and Hong Kong, for instance. They've adopted a Christian name, typically, they're David or Donna, or, a much simpler name for them to use when working with the Western world than their actual birth name. And so we're always looking to prove who the person is and that they're legally using a name that's proper. So asking for a birth certificate and for a marriage certificate is just part of confirming who the person is and that we've identified them properly as a licensee.
Great, thanks, Doug. Makes sense. So everyone needs to provide that form of ID, no matter whether or not they've been licensed with RECA in the past or not.
Well, if they've been licensed with us in the past and they were licensed prior to January of 2014, licensing may be looking to update some of that information that might not have been provided, because the requirements after January of 2014 became much stricter in how we deal with things. So they're trying to sort of tidy up what's in our system by taking this opportunity for people that are applying for a condominium management license. If we don't have that historic information, then they're asking for it at this stage.
Great. Thanks. Okay, Nikki O'Grady, she's asking, does the experienced broker requirement for the new condominium brokerage branching out from the property management brokerage have to have 75 days experience or 2 years experience still in order to be that broker?
To be broker, it's 2 years experience. The 75 days does not apply to the broker or associate broker category. You have to have 2 years minimum experience involved with the management of a brokerage.
Okay, thank you. Just going back up the list here, some of these questions I've skipped over because we'll answer those one-on-one because they're about someone's specific personal circumstance. Yeah, I think we're just about tied up here. Let's see if any more have trickled in. Will RECA provide, John David D'Souza asked, will RECA provide a syllabus of what is covered in the new exams, or will any other exam prep materials besides the paid courses?
Well, there may be some exam prep material created once the exams are finalized, but until that's done, that information wouldn't be available. The best, and it's the same thing from the course provider side, until the courses are completed and we know who's providing courses and what their content looks like, we're not in a position to provide that information in advance. The best I can do at this point is to point you, as I did earlier in the presentation, to the RECA website. If you go to the condominium management section in pages of information, you'll see a link there for the competencies and learning outcomes for condominium managers. And that'll take you, there's 2 different links. One's for associates and one's for brokers. And they're quite they're spreadsheets that list in great detail the competencies and the learning outcomes that fall out of those competencies. So that would give people a very clear picture of what's going to be in the courses and the exams in total.
Great, thanks, Doug. All right, we'll do one more question here. Gail Morton asks, so she's got her condo complex, they've got several apartments that are managed by an independent property management organization, but to the best of her knowledge, doesn't believe that these organizations are licensed. So maybe we can kind of explain how she could find that out, whether or not they're licensed. So she's asking if they're required to gain licensing as a property management rental agency.
So anybody doing property management is required to be, in Alberta, is required to be licensed through RECA. And if you have a company name or a person's name, you can enter either into the search function on the homepage of the RECA website. There's a link that takes you to the search function, and you can input that information. So if it was me, if you were aware that I was doing property management, for instance, you'd put in Doug Dixon in the search function, and up would come whether I'm licensed. If I'm not in the system, then I'm not licensed. The same will be true as soon as we start licensing condominium managers. All the people licensed as condominium managers effective December 1st will be part of that search function. So unit owners and boards of directors will be able to search to make sure the companies that they're talking to are licensed and that the individuals they're talking to are licensed. And if we strongly recommend, to both the industry and the public, that if you're aware of somebody or suspect somebody's providing services, whether it's property management, real estate sales, mortgage brokerage, and now condominium management without a license, to send that information on to us and let us look at it to determine if in fact somebody is practicing without a license. Because in order to protect consumers and the industry, it's important that we follow up on these things, and we do. So and take it quite seriously. So we really appreciate it when people send us information. It might turn out that they are licensed, but their name is spelled differently and they didn't show up. There could be any number of reasons, but better for us to verify what their status is. And if there is a problem that they're providing services that we deem are regulated services, then we will get in touch with them and follow through.
That's right. Yeah, we certainly encourage people to use the find a licensee tool on our website to verify whether or not people or brokerages are licensed in Alberta. Thanks so much, Doug. Appreciate that. And thank you to everybody who came online as well. Yeah, we're just 20 past 12 here. I think we'll wrap it up for the day.
And if anybody on the call feels this session would be of interest and helpful to anybody that hasn't been through one of these sessions, then they can there's one more information session taking place next week. It's on Wednesday afternoon at 1 p.m. And we will also, it's not been advertised yet, but just before, sometime probably in the last 2 weeks of November, we'll do a couple more virtual information sessions to the industry as an update on where we're at with anything that's changed. We should know where we're at with exams, exam challenges, courses, that sort of thing. So we'll do sort of an update. It'll be a much briefer presentation than this one, but I think you'll probably find it quite useful. And it'll be sort of a just in time, just before licensing starts on December 1st. So thanks, everyone.